Thanks so much for tuning in again. So we are so excited to have interviewed Ben Higgins. I think you're really going to love this. I know we were really pleasantly surprised to find that he is just such a nice guy, really approachable, really humble, and I think really opened up. So I really do think that you all will enjoy this interview. Real quick, I just want to introduce us again. I know we have some new listeners since we started this podcast, and you all might be wondering what this podcast is even about. So we are a little help for our friends, and what this is it's a mental health podcast, but we're really aimed at the loved ones of people with mental health difficulties, because I know that that can be really hard to understand. It can be really hard to grasp what they're going through, and it can be a big struggle to know how to help them, and that can be a scary feeling. It can also be difficult to know how to set boundaries and maintain your healthy sense of autonomy and space. So we address that very often as well. As for me, my name is Jacqueline. You might remember me from season 22 of The Bachelor. But now I am a PhD student in clinical psychology at Duke University. My co-host is Kibby McMahon. She's also a PhD student here at Duke in clinical psychology, although she is just about to graduate. So we will soon be Jacqueline and Dr. McMahon. We're both really interested in interpersonal functioning, how to get along better, basically. I'm really interested in some of the barriers to that, like shame and contempt, and she's really interested in what improves connection to others, like empathy and mindfulness. We also both have a particular focus on personality disorders, especially cluster B, like borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. So with that, thanks so much for letting us introduce ourselves again, and enjoy the interview. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Welcome back today. We are so excited to have a very, very special guest. You'll know him from season 20 of The Bachelor. He was The Bachelor himself. It's Ben Higgins. So Ben is the founder of Generous Movement and the author of a new book, which is why we are having him today, called Alone in Plain Sight: Searching for Connection. So we're so excited to have him on because our listeners are people who have loved ones struggling with mental health or struggling with mental health themselves. And, especially right now in the pandemic, it's a time of a lot of disconnection and loneliness. And so we saw that you'd written this book and had opened up about your own experiences with loneliness, Ben, and we were really excited that you were able to become vulnerable with other people. And we're happy to have you here today.
Well, thanks for having me. No, this is great. I'm excited to talk to y'all. And this is a pleasure for me. So I'm happy to dive in.
Awesome. Well, so what made you write this book, and what has the experience of being alone felt like for you or meant for you?
Yeah, that's a big question, because there's a couple elements to it. Why I wrote the book, quite honestly, is because I was given the opportunity to write a book. Mm-hmm. Thomas Nelson and I were in talks, and it was like, would you ever be interested in writing a book? And I said yes, but there was just something inside me. I was like, I don't know how many opportunities I'll have in life to write a book. And so I want to make sure I write about something that matters to me. Mm-hmm. And there's a few things in my life that really stand out that matter to me. And one of those things that is most important to me are people. So none of this makes sense unless you know this, and this is not going to be me preaching. Like, I'm a Christian. And so one of the things that I've always grown up with, understood about people, is that they matter. And that if you follow Jesus's words, like, you have to be looking for and also investing into those who feel like the outsider, those mm-hmm. who, Jesus was very political. He had a lot of social justice behind his mission. And it was, over and over again, it was speaking out for those who were pushed aside by society. And so that was the path that I took because of my faith. It's not, it's always kind of weird to me when people are like, hey, you're such a good dude, or maybe you're a terrible dude. I don't like anything you're doing. But anyways, you have to understand the context of why I do this. And so my whole life, I had felt like the outsider looking in. I explain it maybe simply as the kid looking through the window at the party he wasn't invited to, wishing he'd be invited inside. It's always been an insecurity that's lasted with me. And the more and more I shared that, the more and more others kind of responded to that and said, me too, like, I feel the same way. And so that's where this book really came from, was a response to this insecurity that I've carried with me, my whole life, even today, and saying, hey, when I'm in that place, and that place happens often for me, I don't feel like the best version of myself. In fact, it brings me to my worst parts of me. And
Mm,
so I'm imagining if other people are saying, hey, I feel that way too, maybe they just need an outlet for somebody out there who has the opportunity to write a book to say, I'm right there with you. You're not alone. In fact, maybe our loneliness is this thing that connects us the most. And so what does that look like?
yeah.
Uh, and so that's why, I guess, like to answer that, that's why I wrote this book. And that's why I kind of focused on this topic.
No, we really appreciate. I'm in the middle of reading your book. It's lovely, and I appreciate so much that I'm sure a lot of people listening probably think, well, public figures, right? Like, you guys are surrounded by people, surrounded by adoration, and to even hear that, someone like you could actually feel that too. I'm sure it's super relieving and super validating of everyone's experience.
I hope so. I really do. And it's one of the interesting parts about this is the more and more adoration, because when you become the Bachelor, you get a lot of praise and you also get a lot of criticism immediately.
Jacqueline's nodding. We
Yeah,
talked a lot about that.
and it happens. And I mean, this week is an interesting example. Not to go on a soapbox, and I'll come back to your thought, but this week I've been working with International Justice Mission for a few years with Generous, which is the company that I operate. And one of their partners, their umbrella partners, is the End It movement. The End It movement's a big deal for them because the End It movement raises a ton of funds and then kind of gives those funds to the International Justice Mission, along with a few other organizations that are focused on alleviating and rehabilitating victims that have been in sex trafficking. So this week I posted about it. And if anybody's out there feeling like they are receiving criticism and hate and that they're the only ones receiving it, go look at the comments on that post. They're really terrible. And like, there's no other way to say it. They're really bad, especially knowing the background of why I did what I did and the intention behind it, and also the intention of the movement. And so I say all of that to say, to go back to the original statement where it's like, you do get a lot of criticism. And it's not really going to ever change, I don't think. So what do you do with that criticism? How do you process through it? What happens when you're feeling defeated and disoriented, alone and confused? How do you work through that? And the more praise I got, it actually made it worse, because as I was receiving this praise, I was still on the journey and still am on the journey of saying, I still feel like an outsider and I'm hiding myself a lot of times, like putting on the image that I think will be accepted. And so you actually don't know me. So you're praising me for things that like I don't feel like are true to me. You're saying things, and like, now granted, much rather receive the praise. It's a lot better on me. But it made me feel more alone, because it made me feel like the reason that people like me was not really because of my pains and my struggles and my story. It made me feel like they liked me because of what they thought they knew about me.
Yeah.
That didn't help. It made me feel isolated.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, obviously I, have not had the exposure that you've had, but I do remember feeling like the negative comments that came my way, I would internalize a lot more, and then the positive comments were like, well, this isn't based on reality, you don't really know me, and there was such a disconnect between the praise that I thought I deserved and was getting, but then the negative stuff like kind of did hit a bit more. And so you writing this book, is that an attempt to be more honest and show people who you really are? And so
it is. I don't get a lot out of this book, right? It's my story. Like, I knew it already. And I hope it doesn't come off as like I'm trying to show you how great I am, because in fact, like, the angle I wanted to take with this book is exposing the parts of me that probably weren't admired.
right.
Struggles with addiction, struggles with isolation, struggles with mistreatment of others, struggles with doubts and confusions and wrestling, struggles in romantic relationships. Like, I wanted to highlight those things. I guess the point of the book is to help the reader, hopefully at the end, if anything, say, I feel less alone. Not that I love Ben anymore. Not that I think Ben is even any greater. Because I don't really know what that does for me personally, because it hasn't done much so far in the 5 years that I've kind of received that. The hope is that we can connect. Like, my desire is that it unites, it connects us, it brings an awareness to the fact that, like, in the midst of all of this craziness, this was still me. And so I hope my vulnerability, if anything, connects me with the people that read it, not as much turn it into a praise with the reader.
Yeah, and you do it so well with bringing these very relatable experiences. And we're therapists, so we, hear a lot from people who there's similar things that you guys are talking about. The criticisms hit hard, and the praise feels like it's based on the image they project in person. So, for take us through maybe a time that you really felt super alone or super that outsider. Like what comes up in your mind when you think about that?
It's weird, and I don't necessarily want this to be about the show, but there's a moment, like my experience on The Bachelorette was sacred. And I say that because I had been able to live my life in the shadow. I had been able to walk through life, having my friendships, having an incredible family, walking through it without ever receiving praise or criticism. So I was just kind of in the shadow. And I remember this moment where it hit me. I was walking out the door of this house with my bags packed, and my buddy says, "Hey, we'll see you in 2 weeks." And I was like, "Oh, that doesn't feel great." Like that kind of just like reinforces my biggest insecurity. But yeah, probably true. And I got in the car with all those guys on night one. And I remember sitting in this car with like 4 or 5 other guys, and they were like professional athletes. They were like entrepreneurs. They were doctors. They were lawyers. And I remember looking around and going, I don't belong here. And like, not just saying it as like I don't belong here, but I'm going to do my best. It's like, no, I don't belong here. And it brought up this anxiety in me that had like existed throughout my life at different moments, right? If it was in sports, if it was in school, if I was on a date with somebody like that I didn't think was, that was far out of my league, I just would always have this thought is I don't belong here. And then anxiety would come up inside of me. This like, I got to get out. I can't be in this. So I walk into the mansion on night one, and I stood on the side. I kind of stood off to the side, and it was 4 weeks later. And one of the producers on the show, who's a good friend of mine now, Alon, who is a very smart man, who has his quirks, but he's very good at reading people. That was his kind of thing on the show. And he pulled me aside and he said, "Ben, I don't like you." I was like, "What do you mean?" And it was the first time anybody's ever said that to my face. Granted, I grew up in high school and college. For me, we didn't have social media, and so criticism wasn't like, it'd been really hard for somebody to tell me they didn't like me. Maybe I heard it in passing from a rumor, but like nobody had ever said it to my face ever. I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "I don't like you because I don't know you. You don't let anybody get to know you. You stand on the side, you say the right thing at the right moment. You enter into conversation when you feel it's safe. You exit conversation when things really matter. I don't know you." So we sat for 4 hours that evening and discussed this. And I felt safe. I don't know why I felt safe, but I felt safe. And I think it was such a common theme in those like pressure-packed 4 weeks that I was like, I want to express this. We got to the place where I admitted to him, "Hey, I feel unlovable. I feel unlikable. I feel like the outsider. I don't feel like I belong here. I don't even know why I'm still here. Like, this doesn't make sense to me. I feel like this is a big trick. I feel like I am the one that you guys are helping push through this for the epic like moment where I fail and I feel it and it breaks me." And so that's the time where my big storyline was I felt unlovable. That didn't encapsulate the whole story. The whole story was I felt unlovable. I felt unlikable. I just felt misplaced. I didn't feel like I belonged there or really anywhere. Like if you would have asked me, "Where do you belong?" I would have said, "I don't know." And that's the moment that kind of comes up because it was the first time I'd ever opened up about it. The first time I'd ever shared it and allowed the space then to heal from it, or at least to work and gain the tools to start to process it. So yes, that is the moment. Now, granted, again, it's weird to say that happened on a reality television show, but it did, and it changed my life forever.
Yeah. Wow. In that moment when you felt that anxiety of, I don't belong here, that's just such a powerful moment. Did you have a sense that there was something about you that didn't belong or something that you had to hide?
No. Because I look back and I even tried to write this in the book and I was like, what are the things I'm most ashamed of, right? Like I struggled with addiction for years of my life. And like those are some dark moments. Like when I think, stories really matter, and I don't know if you can quantify the pain of somebody else's story, but like I was stealing like pills from my like the older people in my life, like the people that were prescribed these things. Like that's a really dark time if you're like stealing that stuff. So like I had shame or guilt around that, I guess, but there wasn't a lot I was trying to hide. It was just this kind of like unconscious feeling. And a part of it though, and again, I believe in Jesus to this day. However, I think the church and like mismessaging within that caused me some like deep-seated trauma that I'm still working through. Like as a child, you're hearing that like, you are nothing, that you don't matter. The evangelical story is that the only reason that you have any meaning is because of the blood of the cross, which I'm not a theologian. I can't argue that. But as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, that's hard to process. And when you start to say, I believe in this God has touched my life, this God has interacted in my life, I believe in this God, so I want to believe in what the truth of this God is. And you start to act on that, like those things being said to you, and believe it yourself, it puts you in a weird place. Like, and it still does to this day. It puts you in a place of feeling consistently like I need to be less than. And maybe you do. Again, I'm working through this, but I don't think it was healthy. It didn't make me the best version of myself. It didn't make me the most loving version of myself. It didn't make me the version of myself that could pursue God intimately. It just made me distant from everything. So I think that happened at a young age. And I just started to act on it and believe it.
Yeah, I've had a number of Christian patients who have said similar things, especially that they say that there's this, it's coming from pain, right? Like someone died and bled for you, and you have original sin, depending on, what type of Christianity they follow. So it's just this feeling of this amount of giving and love, but from a lot of pain, right? That you have to make up for, or you have to do something to atone for.
Yeah, like one of the most popular songs has a line in it that says like a wretch like me. When you sing that as a kid and you say, oh, I'm a wretch, like I'm awful. It's like, maybe as an adult you could process it in a better way and understand where it's coming from in the context. But when you're a kid, you're just like, oh, I'm awful. Like I don't belong. And so, yeah, I think, I found not a group that I say would be my yes men within the faith now, but people that can process this stuff with me, that want to like get to a place of healthiness, get to a place where you can love others and love God well. And that's out there. So anybody's listening to this going like, yeah, so like, why do you still belong? Like that is a certain denomination, a certain sect within Christianity that would bring that upon children. There are many people out there who wouldn't agree with that language and that tactic. And I found that, and that's been healthy for me in all of my relationships, my relationship with others, my relationship with myself, my relationship with God. And that's, it's brought up in the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you're getting into the feeling of connection, this feeling of finding your people, finding places to process. Can you give me an example of a time where, like kind of a Lamba, where you've really felt seen, not just for the Bachelor and all that stuff, but someone was like, oh, I don't feel alone right now.
The moments I felt most seen it's the reason that Generous exists, because it's when I'm coming into kinship with others. I feel most seen when it's not about me, but when it's a common like uniting process. So with Generous, we invest into communities and people who have been ridden with injustice in their life. And so we go into, not like be the saviors, but to sit with them and say, what do you need? What do you want? And what do you dream of? And then possibly, how can we help? And those moments, those meetings, those interactions, not only in around the globe, but in our neighborhoods, have been the moments I felt most seen, because it feels most healthy. It feels good. It brings the most joy in my heart, in my soul. I can't identify a moment where I've personally felt like the words or the actions of others have validated my seen-ness. But I can tell you that the common like group, the community that I associated with can do that. And it allows me to not make it about me, which ultimately allows it to be about us. And that's where I feel the most seen.
What was it like for you to be on The Bachelor, which is the diametrical opposite of that experience? I mean, you'd felt like I don't belong here. This isn't right. I don't know if it was in feelings of inferiority, and then suddenly you're the guy. Do you feel like you were able to really connect with that experience? Was it uncomfortable for you? What was it like?
It wasn't. I don't know why. It wasn't that uncomfortable for me. Maybe because I think I remember feeling like the thing I have here is that I don't feel like the Bachelor. Like maybe my secret sauce is that like I can come into this thing not thinking I'm that great. And maybe just possibly it would change the dynamic of the show. It would change the relationship within the show. Maybe just possibly that I could come into this knowing that I remember saying like, if all of this fails, like if this whole thing just blows up in my face, I'm going to be okay. Like it's not my identity. It's not what I want my legacy to be. It's not what I want to be people to remember me as 30, 40 years from now. And I think that helped me. And so it didn't make me feel uncomfortable. In fact, after I got off The Bachelorette, I was feeling really good about myself. Like there was a lot, like I remember watching the New Year's ball drop, and behind Ryan Seacrest, the ABC building sat, and the whole side of the building was me. Like the whole side of that thing was me. I was like, that is cool. And then you look you walk to the grocery store and People Magazine has your picture up. And then the slogan for my season was the perfect Ben. So for a moment you're like, oh, like I'm doing okay. And then it starts to fall down around you quickly. It's fleeting. There's somebody next. It's my buddy sat me down one day and he's like, oh, you're like king of the nerds. Like you're just like on the show with a bunch of people who are single looking for love. And like, you just got chosen to like be the face of it. And so I was like, so as this started to fall down around me, I called some of my confidants. So I have a couple buddies in my life that I've given them the door to speak truth into me. Like whatever that looks like, I know they love me. I know they want me healthy. And so when they see something going on, especially in the chaos that was that season, to speak into me. And one of my buddies called me and goes, what if this thing was never about you? What if you could make this about others? And again, that sounds great. People are like, oh, how sweet that is. No. This was my friend holding me accountable because it wasn't about me. I was making it. It was about me. I was making it about me. And he goes, how much better would this be if 10, 20, 30 years from now, you could see this as kind of the launching off point to where your impact became greater. And I took that into The Bachelor. It's like, this maybe never is about me. And I kind of believe that because I believed it to be healthy. I believed it to be good. And it also kind of like gave me an excuse out to say, oh yeah, if I fail at this, like this wasn't about me anyways, I'm okay. And it worked. I would say it worked. Like it allowed that process to be enjoyable. It allowed that process to be real to me. It allowed that season of life to feel worthwhile. And so it never felt, it was weird. It never felt like I think I was out of place there.
It's so fascinating what you're saying, because I bet a lot of people who feel lonely and disconnected or out of place kind of fantasize about having their face on the side of a building, and that's the moment where I'll be fully accepted and seen. But actually, the answer to my question before of when were you most seen was when you were helping others and seeing other people. So it's just interesting that the story that people would think would be the path out of loneliness is not. And either just like distancing yourself and actually being there with other people was.
And it didn't, I mean, I think a part of it too was interesting where, and I don't know what this path would feel like for me or how I'd handle it, but I came onto The Bachelor. I was an analyst for a software company. It was a good job out of college, but I was terrible at it, like really bad. Like I was writing these user manuals for this software and like I was failing. Like I was definitely the like, hey, let's not give this project to Ben. Like he's not going to do well at it. And so I kind of had that when I left to go on the show. And then after the show ended, something hit me at some moment. I was like, you're famous for like nothing. Like, and like, you have no tangible skill set that's brought you here. Like you might use this for good, And that's great. You might be an advocate for good. That's awesome. But like that necessarily isn't a skill set. It's something I think we all can bring to the table. We all have our purpose and our value and our mission in life. And so maybe if I had a skill set that I'd be like, I worked really hard to get here. And now I am the quarterback who's won a Super Bowl and I am being praised for that. I think I would feel that a little bit more. Like it's all this work has been worth it. I didn't work to become the Bachelor. I had nothing to show for it other than the fact that I was placed on a television show and said, go date. And okay, like we can try. And it worked, right? Like a lot of people watch that show. But I think that might be an interesting thing to like, when it comes to like the listeners out there, is there was no work put into this. So there's very little pride that I have by being the Bachelor. Like there's nothing like today, if you told me you were the Bachelor, that's awesome. I'd be like, yeah, it was cool. But like, that doesn't make me feel better about myself. It just means like I got chosen at some point for some reason.
You're bringing another interesting point that you talk about in the book is like identity and what do people see and what do we really identify with, and do they see that? And for you now, you're doing so many other things with a generous movement. Can you tell us a little bit more about like, oh, this is the kind of stuff that brings me pride?
Yeah, Generous. So Generous is a for-profit company, but the owners of it, there's 4 of us. At the very beginning, signed off any ability to make a profit on this company. So the value of the company or on the product sold, we cannot make money on it. Now we might get salaries, and I haven't yet, but I hope one day, you put in a lot of hours, you would like to get paid for that somehow, some way. But at the value of the company or the product sold, 100% of the profits will be donated. And so we donate to people-focused nonprofits. So if that, like this year, it was Prison Fellowship. At the Christmas season, who gives a Christmas to kids whose parents are incarcerated, or if it's a Loveland Foundation, or if our main beneficiary is Humanity and Hope United, which does sustainable change work in Central America. So all of these projects are people focused. They're built to bring some type of sustainable change and value to the communities around them. I just think I don't know if I feel pride in that as much as I just feel like it's where I'm supposed to be. Like, there's very few moments where like, even when like lives are being really positively affected, and I'd like to believe that we do that I'm like, oh, this feels good, Ben. I don't think I've ever felt that as much as it's like, I'm just really happy to have a seat at this table. And that makes me feel better about myself. Like that brings me joy. I think that would be the difference.
And what does that feel like? I mean, for many people it might feel purposeless or the lack of pride. There's this feeling of like, this is my heart set, or tell us a little bit more about what that must feel like.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think it feels like I belong. It feels like my time is worthwhile. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that might be the biggest thing, is that I just feel like the spreadsheets that I type up, the time spent sitting right here on my computer, the moments in conversation. I just got back from Honduras 2 days ago, and like, it just feels like it matters, maybe. Mm-hmm. It feels like I matter because I'm a part of something that matters. It's kind of the message of the book, is that you do matter. That it's, this doesn't come from me being a Bachelor. This really doesn't have much to do with it. Now it helps sales. It helps the organization grow, but this just comes from a place of like, as humans, I believe that we matter, that we have value, we have purpose, we have skills that can be brought to the table and help those who need it the most, including like ourselves. So I just feel like maybe the difference is it feels like I belong.
Yeah, I mean, one of our questions was like, for the people who feel lonely and disconnected, what do you do? Like, how do you move out of that? And even what you're saying, like remembering that you matter and being a part of something that you feel like is meaningful is the way. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
It is, yeah. And I mean, to add on to that, one of the ways that I like to talk to people who feel lonely, and I've had the opportunity to do that since this book especially, is I encourage everybody to like start speaking truth into themselves. Like, who am I? If you're a person of faith, then like, what does that mean to you? If you aren't, what does that mean to you? Like, who are you? What does this breath and life that we have mean? Like, it's the kind of the funny like question that we ask ourselves a lot as kids, is like, what is this whole thing about? Like, what is life about? And maybe as adults, we slip away from that a little bit, unless you're like a very philosophical human and you love to dive into the deep, like hard questions of life. But the fact that we have breath, the fact that we're talking today, the fact that I can sit and communicate with you all is sacred. It's a miracle. No matter how you view it in the back end of it, it's very special. And so speaking truth into yourself with those things, and then also recognizing that there's many others who feel disconnected and alone as well. In fact, the stat is, and I need to get an updated version of this, but like, I think it was the early 2000s, Harvard came out with their study and said that they predicted that loneliness would double over our lifetime. And so like 40% in 1990, I think, felt alone, and then 60% in the early 2000s. And then I can't imagine what
and then now it's 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I can't imagine what that is today. And so just know that your loneliness doesn't make you different. It actually might make you most connected. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean to you? To know that like when you walk by somebody in the streets, or when there's somebody that is bullying you or making terrible comments about you, that they're hurting also. What would that perspective do for your life?
I think that's great. I mean, you're right that like when we are lonely, we feel intrinsically disconnected and cut off, but in reality there's so much connection to be had. There's so many people who are feeling the exact same doubts and insecurities that we are. What was your transition like? How did you get from I don't belong to wait a minute, I think I'm onto something here, I think I'm starting to feel that connection?
Yeah, I spoke down in Honduras 3 days ago, and somebody asked me that same question, and it was the first time anybody's asked me that, and I said, I don't know if I have transitioned. Mm-hmm. Like, I think I still sit in it. Now I have tools that help me process it. Because I don't want to live in a place in my life where I feel disconnected, where I feel like the outsider, where I feel alone. Maybe also talking to others have made me realize that like my insecurities are not just isolated to me. And so I think that's something to always recognize. But it's still something that comes up often. It's still something that I sit in regularly, but I can process it better now. I have the tools and the knowledge and the truth to help me realize that, yes, I might feel alone. And that is something I will not hide. However, it will not paralyze me. It is not something that I need to believe within myself that is only isolated to me, that others feel that way as well. And it allows me to step out this door and go into the world. Maybe, and this could be, you could tell me if I'm wrong, maybe in an unhealthy way, assuming that others are hurting also, and entering into that space, it allows me to feel more like I belong. So it could be a selfish act that I do to feel like I belong as well. I think looking in the lives of others and saying, hey, I don't say this like this, but it's like, I assume you're hurting. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, if we build the relationship, and if you want to share that with me, I'm here for it, because I felt it too. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's a transition. I don't know if loneliness is a weird thing. It's a terrible feeling. I can't imagine a worse feeling than feeling alone and sad. But now I guess I've just developed the process to continue to try to heal from it.
Well, that is a transition. It's the relationship with loneliness. So even that's a good message, where these pains, these inner pains from childhood that we hold on to, we hope one day they'll go away completely, but maybe it's not that. It's that we have compassion for our own, or more open about it, connect to others on it. So the relationship and how we respond to it might be different.
It's not my shadow self anymore. It's not the dark thing that I carry with me that nobody else knows. People know it. I'm open to it. And that has been healing, to sit in the room and say, no, this is how I feel. And and I'm not hiding it anymore. That has, like you said, that has been that relationship with it, that I'm not ashamed of it, that there's not shame and guilt wrapped around it now, has helped me.
By the way, I think it's wise to assume that other people are hurting as well, and to just know that's there and be open to seeing it and talking with them about it. One of the best pieces of advice an old therapist of mine said was that sometimes we're encountering other people's anxieties. Like, so much of the time when we think it's about us, we think, we've been hurt. This often comes across in like relationships, social anxiety. It's like sometimes we're actually encountering the other person's pain and the other person's anxiety. And so I think you acknowledging that is perfectly wise.
Good. Because that would be really bad if you're like, yeah, that's really unhealthy, Ben. And I'd be like, well, shoot.
You're the only one who thinks that.
Yeah.
Awkward.
Yeah. And that's where Alone in Plain Sight comes in. This book is my passion project. I think if it was determined by sales, there's obviously different routes I would take to write a book. I'd probably talk about my time on the show because that's what people seem to be most interested in. But that isn't my life. And it's not my legacy. It's not my identity. It's not what I hold myself to every day. And so the Alone in Plain Sight came from a place of saying, can I do something that I feel like the reader could connect with, gain something from, and then allow themselves to walk back out into this world knowing that they matter. And that would be worth it for me. That would be the coolest thing I could ever be a part of.
I think that's fabulous. With only a couple minutes left, I just wondered if there was anything you wish we had asked, if there's any message that you really want to convey that's been important to you.
I think, no. I mean, you guys do a great job at this. I think just kind of like to summarize this, there is a great responsibility and a burden that we carry as humans, I believe, to recognize the pain in ourselves and the pain in others. And I don't want that to be lost upon this next generation as it moves fast and there's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of disorientation. That at the end of the day, we're still human, that we still have the burden of connecting, that I desire for humans to see their value and to believe they're a part of helping this world, not hurting it. And maybe just possibly like if they could taste and see what it's like to be a part of healing, not only themselves, but others. How sacred that is, how powerful that is, how meaningful that is, how it brings life and breath into our lives. And it feels like right now, not that people are neglecting that, but it's just not been shown to a lot of people. And I just hope that maybe if somebody's listening to this, they can say, I could be a part, like right now where I'm at in the healing process for myself and others. And I would promise you that that's going to be one of the best things that you ever do in your life. And it's going to feel also the best you've ever felt.
Well, I think that's an absolutely fabulous message. And I agree with you. We need to see more of it because I've been seeing too much of the opposite. But I think that's awesome. Ben, thank you so much for joining us. If anything you want to plug, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Generous Coffee is a great thing. I want just people, if you don't drink coffee, that's fine. Just go check it out. But we sell specialty grade coffee online at generouscoffee.com. All the profits are donated. I always say this because there's a lot of weird organizations out there, but if you want to see our financials, I'm more than happy to show you. They're not pretty. There's not a lot of money sitting in there, but we do sell a lot of coffee. The book, Alone in Plain Sight, I would love if people listening would go out and read that and review that for me. That's just selfishly a thing that really helps the process of selling a book and bringing a book to the table. And so you can find that really anywhere, Amazon, online at benhigginsbook.com. I mean, if you want more info, you can follow me at higgins.ben. I would always welcome positive supporters, not only to myself, but to the things being shared. Strong voices who stand up for others in a healthy way. And so you can follow me on Instagram.
Awesome. Any closing words, Gibby?
Can we order the Generous Coffee? Like I'm based in New York. Can I actually order it?
You can order it. Yeah, it's all online. So you go on, you order it. It's shipped to you. I would encourage you. I mean, it is specialty grade, so it's like the highest graded coffee. It's single origin. It's traceable. We're right now implementing really cool plans to increase the livelihoods of the people growing the coffee. That's a whole nother tangent I could go down of what that's looked like over the last couple hundred years. generouscoffee.com. We are an online store, so we specialize in you going on, clicking buy, and we'll send it to your house.
Awesome. Yeah, and I recommend the book to anyone listening. I'm in the middle of it, and I love it. So, you got a good review from me. I'll kind of type something up, but
thanks.
Good job.
Means a
lot.
All
right, thanks so much, Ben.
Okay, see y'all.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for the time. Thanks for this conversation. It means a lot to me.
It was
Ben,
wonderful.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.